Okay, so the Gemara here, we started with the Gemara on very important Gemara for many reasons. So let's go look at it quickly, and then we'll analyze it. We have the Mar.
Rabbi, which daf is it?
We're on Beis on Beis Vayech the Lechazi Miman Nokad, and then we're going to be jumping around a little bit. But there are also Marmakomos. The Marmakomos, which say on the Mekorot Binyan Manut Mocher Ve'edachad Misayeya.
Rabbi, did you say Beis Amud Beis?
Yeah.
How far is it?
It is in the middle of the page. I'll tell you how many lines, if that will help. 3, 6, 9, about 11 lines down. You see there's an asterisk there. First word is really Nekachumemkar.
Okay, I'll find it. I'm sorry, I don't want to waste
No, it's okay. We 11 lines down from the top. I think. Yeah, exactly. So if you remember back in, a long time ago, the Mishnah has a double language. The Mishnah says, Shnaim ochels and betalis, two people grab on to an object, right? Zel marni mitzasia, zel marni mitzasia, zel markulishli, zel markulishli. This one said, I found it. The other guy says, I found it. This one says, the whole thing is mine. This one said, the whole thing is mine. So in the previous Gemara, the Gemara basically is, started asking the question about the double language. So they concluded that really there are two different cases here. One is the case of ani mitzasia. That refers to a mitzia. A mitzia means an object. He found an object, meaning it wasn't previously owned. And the question is, who found it and picked it up and acquired it first? And there's conflicting stories. But the other one says, Zulak zel makulashali. Zel makulashali, according to the Gemara, means, it's a different case. It's a case of mekachumemkar. Mekachumemkar means that it was the object was sold. I mean, there's an owner, a previous owner. Everybody knows who he is. The dispute arises: who did he sell it to? Levi owned the object, and now Reuven and Shimon each claim that he was the recipient of a sale from this Levi, and that's the dispute. So that's what the Gemara is repeating. The Gemara is just going back on this after a bit of a discussion. The Gemara says, so now that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara explains why you need both cases. But then afterwards, the Gemara says, Mekachum Memkar, how could the case be a case of Mekachum Memkar, meaning where the dispute arises over who was the appropriate recipient of the sale? The Gemara says, Valecha zizuzi miman nokat. If that were the case, why don't we just follow the money, as they say? Why don't we just, look at the money trail? Valecha that's literally what it means. Valecha zizuzi, maybe this is the origin of that statement, of that famous, cliche, follow the money trail. Valecha zizuzi miman nokat. Why don't we see who he received the money from? Meaning, if Reuven and Shimon each claim to be the legitimate purchasers of an object, then why don't we just see who's the one who gave the money? Now, when the Gemara asks this question, it's not 100% sure, it's not 100% clear what exactly they're asking, as we will see. Are they asking, ask the mocher? I mean, let the mocher, be the one to clarify who gave the money? Is that what they're asking? Or are they asking if there's only one transfer of money in all of this, then that would indicate who the owner is. It has nothing to do with the mocher. Just objectively, if we know where the money came from, then we know who the owner is. Maybe it means even ask the two of them instead of asking them who is the proper purchaser. Ask them which of you, outlaid, the money. So we're going to see in a moment that the Rishonim have different views how to read this interesting Gemara. Something the Gemara is asking, let's look and find out where the money came from, but we're not sure exactly what that means. Is that a euphemism for let's ask the mocher, or is that something more objective about the actual purchase? Either way, the Gemara neutralizes that question by saying lo tzricha denokat mitravayu, that the case in Achanami, if there was only one outlay of money, that would solve the problem. How? Well, we'll figure out in a moment. But the case is really one in which two people gave out money. How could two people give money for the same object? So the answer is nokat mitravayu, michad midaite, michad bal korche, v'lo yadana mihu midaite umihu bal korche.
But it sounds as there is a third person.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a mocher.
Yeah,
The third person is the mocher. In Mekach Memka, there'll always be a mocher, right?
Mekach, yeah.
So that's the third person. Yeah. So, but is the Gemara's question we should ask the third person? We should ask the mocher, and we should believe him. Is that what they're saying, or are they saying follow the money trail? We don't even need to ask the mocher. We just need to see
Well,
who the money came from. But
well,
either way, the Gemara's answer
obviously, if you follow the money, that's a better proof, right? Isn't the money?
maybe it might be. We'll see in
Well,
a moment.
how can it not be? I'm trying to understand. If you follow the money and you don't ask the mocher, isn't that the biggest proof? I'm trying to understand what could be better than that.
What could be better than that? Well, it's always possible that somebody, gives money and that the person still has no intention of selling to him. He just, puts money down on the guy's, you know,
No, then it would get returned. Absolutely not. If someone sends you money and you don't return it,
not if you're adamant and you still want to keep it, especially if both people. I mean, in the end, well,
hold on.
remember we're talking about a
Someone gives you
situation.
money for a specific reason,
Yeah,
and they're adamant for that reason. You still don't have the right just to keep their money. Meaning,
right,
somebody wants to buy your house
right,
and they
100%.
wire you $1 million. So can you just not sell the house and keep the million and do what you want?
No,
That's
you can't.
perfect.
No, no, you can't keep the money. But
That's
that
my
doesn't.
point. So you follow
Right,
the money.
but the point is, it's not 100% proof that you are the proper purchaser. It just means that you'll get your money back, right?
No, I'm saying the fact that you didn't return the money and you kept it for a
Well, this
long
is
period
all.
of time.
It could very well be that this all, as we'll see, this might have just all taken place in the heat of the moment, right? So
Oh yeah, no, no. If all you show is a wire in a day, 100%. But if it
yeah,
shows over a period of time that money was wired and kept there for an extended period of time, I think that would anyone would agree that's
yeah, I
proof.
agree with that. I agree with that. But we'll see in a moment the parameters of it. But they likely, as we'll see in a moment, this is all, in the heat of the moment. Like this is all happening. Because remember, look at the answer of the Gemara, right? The answer is he received money from both parties, one of them willingly, the other one kind of, was trying to force the issue. So there's no question that he's not going to keep both sums. If half the money is going back, the question is, who's still the owner? They're still arguing about the ownership. Each one wanted to be the owner. So let's look at how each of the Rishonim read this Gemara. So again, the background of the problem in this Gemara is as follows. The Gemara says in Kiddushin, I did a bad job of representing this Gemara. I don't know whether it skipped a line or something here, but I didn't do such a good job. But look at it anyway in the Mar Makomos. For some reason, the main line that I wanted from the Gemara and Kedushin got omitted. I don't know if the computer program ate up that line or whatever, but we'll work with it.
God has a sense of humor.
What?
Hashem has a sense of humor.
Exactly. Well, there's no question about that. The Gemara says in Kedushin, Ayin Gimel Amid Beis to Ayin Dalin Amid Aleph. We began talking about this a little bit last time. That there are individuals who are accorded like a higher credibility, in terms of solving, um, you know, um, clarifying what took place when there's some sort of a dispute. So the Gemara says, Neman balamekach lomar lazeh macharti v'lazeh ein lazeh lo macharti, should say. So the one of the things is that an owner has a special nemanus to say, oh, he's the person who acquired this from me. The Gemara will continue to say, again, then the Gemara asks, "V'nechsi zuzi mimanakat," right? Which is kind of what we're dealing with. Like, why don't you just follow the money trail? Why do we need to trust the mocher? So the Gemara says, "So tzricha denakat mitravayu, v'amar chad midaite v'chad bal korche, v'lo yediyah midaite v'lo the lo midaite." We don't know who was trying to force the issue and who was the authentic purchaser that he accepted his money willingly. Then the Gemara says, Neman dayan lomar, this is the main part that I wanted. A judge is believed to say, like, let's say there's a din Torah, go through the din Torah, and now there's some dispute after the din Torah. Each one says, I won the case, and the other one says, I won the case. So the dayan is believed to identify who the winner and who the loser is. So the Gemara says, that's only true if the Balidinim are still present. It's not asking about an event that took place a long time ago. Then the Gemara says, next is Chusa rather manakat. The Gemara says, let's say there's no record because somebody tore up, I guess the party who lost was upset and he just ripped up the court document, that registers the winner. Then the Gemara says, V'nihadar v'naidinu. The Gemara says, B'shuda the dayan, not going to retry the case. So we believe the dayan. The case that's not here, which is even more important in a way, is the case of the midwife. The Gemara says, Nemenes achaya, the midwife is believed to say, either, this child belongs to this couple and that child belongs to the other couple, or this child came out first and that child came out second. If they're twins, and it's a question of, a bechor. Point is that the Gemara identifies a dayan, a chaya, a judge, a midwife, a mocher, right, a seller. The Gemara also speaks about the nemanus of a father and a mother. Like the father has special nemanus to say, this is my son, or to say this is my oldest son for purposes of Yerusha Bechor, and the mother has certain nemanus about her children in certain cases. So this is a very interesting phenomenon, right? That the Gemara is speaking about. Because normally, the halacha is very, all things being equal, very democratic, and very egalitarian, I guess you would say, in terms of nemanus. We have a principle, Idacha Neman Bisurim. And then, when it comes to other matters, Davisha Be'erva, Dine Mamanis, Dine Nefashos, capital crimes, monetary law, we have the requirement of Eidos. And, it's pretty, the rules are across the board. But the special nemanus of a mocher, a chaya, a dayan, a father, a mother, they really, stand out a little bit. So what is it about them? Is there really a special nemanus? It seems from this Gemara in Kedushin that there is. And part of the special nemanus relates to the mocher. Well, he's one of the cases. So that's background point number one, which we'll get back to. What is the nature of that special nemanus? Is it more of an illusion than a reality? I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. Maybe it seems like there's nemanus, but really it's for other reasons that fall into broader categories. What is that din? What are the implications of it? But that's problem number one. Problem number two, I shouldn't say that's a problem. That's issue number one. Problem number one and issue number two is the following. The Gemara in Kedushin and the Tosefta in Bab Metzia, right here in the beginning, says, for example, about the Mocher, that the only time that we believe him, he only is accorded this special namanos, is bisman shemikcho biyado, when the object hasn't yet left his domain. So it's in his domain, and therefore we believe him to say this one bought it and this one didn't buy it, etc. Just like the Gemara said about the Dayan, right? We only believe him kishabali dinim omdim lafana, and the Gemara says about the Chaya, the midwife, that we only believe her before she handed over. While the children are still in her custody, I guess you'd call it. So then we believe her. But once she is given over the children, once the Dayan, the Baledinim are gone, and once the Lokeach and the Mocher, once the Mekach is Eno Biyado, right? This is not true about the father and the mother, but the other cases, what seems to be the special Namanus accorded to them is limited to the moment, or that they're in control. If they're not, the second that it's no longer biyadem, it doesn't apply. So
unless he has a star, maybe.
What?
Unless he has a star that confirms the deal.
No. If they're Edus or Star, if you have other means, that's a great point. If you have other means of establishing what took place, or more conventional means than that, then you don't need any of this. The problem is only the midwife was there, when all these children were born, so we're trusting her, to identify, the order or which child belongs to who. We don't have witnesses. We don't have a star. So in the absence of more objective and conventional information, it seems like we're residing trust in these, individuals. So question number one is, what is that based on? And question number two, as we'll see now, is if it's true that it's only bisman shemikcha biyado, for example, so it's a big problem for the Gemara in Bab Metzia. Why? Because the Gemara in Kedushin is just talking about a regular, mocher. That's fine. But the Gemara in Bab Metzia is talking about the mocher in the context of a Mishnah that says what? Shnayim ochsin betalis. But if two people are holding on to talis, that means it's not mikcho biyado. If it's not mikcho biyado, why did the Gemara say v'lechsi zuzim imanakat, we should listen to the mocher? Unless they didn't really mean listen to the mocher, they meant follow the money trail, nothing to do with the mocher, right? Which isn't clear in the Gemara. But if they meant listen to the mocher, when they said lechsi zuzim imanakat, or at least when they answered the nakat zuzim bitravayu, if what they were saying was we have to listen, they're explaining why we don't trust the mocher to solve the problem. How would the mocher solve the problem if he's only believed Gizman Shemikha Biyado, and we're talking about Shnai Moks and Batalis, right? Oh, so just to highlight this a little bit more, let's look for the moment, first, before we get to Rashi, let's look at the Rif. The Rif should be on page 2 of your Mar Makomos. It's in the back here, of course. I hope everybody has the Mar Makomos, or anybody who, wants to have Mar Makomos should have Mar Makomos. So this is these are the new Mar Makomos. Mikorot, it says Mikorot Inyan Namanus Mocher Veidachon Nesayeh. Everybody have that? I'm assuming yes. Okay. I'll take the silence as a shtika kahod. Right. Okay, so the Rif asks this question. So this is what the Rif says. This is on page 2 of our Mar Makomos. It says Rif Masechet Bab Metzia. Michad midaita michad bal korche, v'liyada mihu midaita umihu bal korche. Hilkach zei shava she'en lapakas michetzia, v'zei shava she'en lapakas michetzia. Upalgi lolatalis, upalgi luhuladami. Right, Jacob's going to be happy about this last few words, meaning what the case, according to the Gemara, is what? He received money from two different people, He only sold it to one person.
Right.
And so what do you do with the extra money?
Well, you had to give back. You can't keep both.
Exactly. So that's why I said you're going to be happy. So the Rif addresses this and says, well, you split the object, each one takes a shvua on half, and you split the talis, and then he adds upalgi lahu ladami. You also split the extra money,
Mm.
What is that?
right? Let's say the talis cost I don't know, $50.
Right.
Each one plopped tried to force one each one gave him $50. So you take the $50 talis and you split it in two.
And they get $25 each back.
And each one gets, for the $50 that was not the purchase price, the extra, each one gets 25 of that back.
Well, that's natural if they split the Tullus.
Yeah. I know Jacob's is concerned about the extra money. Well, it was predictable that he was concerned about it, but he also expressed his concern.
Obviously, no one is supposed to come out of this thing with more than they deserve. So,
Exactly. But the Rif says it.
But that's an interesting case because the whole Gemara we've been learning Shnai Melchus Metalis is you can't split a talus, and if let's say it's a piece of
No.
art,
So you're right. So you're splitting the value too. Right.
In other words, what are you selling here that you can split? In other words, there are a lot of things you can't split, and a lot of people don't want to share it.
Right.
So
No. So then you would split the value too.
Grapes, you could split it. You give half.
Right. You'd split the value
each.
Right. As we pointed out from the Gemara in Zayin of Aleph, you would split the value of the object too. But let's say, that doesn't have to be the same as the purchase price.
We're assuming this is divisible.
Let's say it, yeah.
Right.
But if it isn't,
that's where I'm going.
But if it's the price, let's assume, for example, that it went up in the meantime, or it could have gone down. Doesn't make a difference.
Right.
By the time you get to selling it, let's say it's doubled in price, right? So you're getting $25 each for your $50, extra 50, and each person's getting a $50, because the price the talis.
But you can flip the case the other way. It went down.
Yeah, the same thing, same problem.
Yeah, so it went down. So is that?
I'm trying to be optimistic. Why should I give the guy a loss?
If it went down, that's tough luck. What can you do? That's life.
Yeah. So then each one would get, half of his money, but half of the value. If it went down, it went down.
So just to be clear, so we're saying a case where the mocher just doesn't want to deal. He just wants to let them split it because he doesn't want to pick a side.
No, nothing to do with the mocher. For some reason we can't. What we're saying is we don't know who the real owner. We don't know who the purchaser is.
And the mocher doesn't know either.
So the Gemara wanted to say, why don't we ask the mocher, or why don't we? So the Gemara said, because right. Both people gave the money, we don't believe the mocher. Now we have to explain why.
By the way, does this get into the issue? And the Talmud sometimes raises the issue as to whether we believe that two things can happen exactly the same time, or they cannot happen exactly the same.
Not really. Either way, the Gemara. Again, this is a Gemara earlier. We've already seen some of the Gemaras later. But if you remember, the Gemara says that the possibility of Chaluka Yichola Yosemes in Mitzia, for example, is that maybe they picked it up together. We consider that a serious part. What you're talking about is there's something called Efshel Tzamtzem, Yefshel Tzamtzem.
Right.
Yeah. You don't have to get into that now. Okay. So listen to this. That's what you do. But he doesn't address the question yet. So then the Rif says, Tan Rabbanan, Hodos Badin Kamedim Dami. Right? If somebody admits something, if somebody, incurs a loss through admission, like he admits that he owes somebody money, then that is called Hodos Badin Kamea Edim Dam. We believe him. But Amasai is Manchatonu V'hodalo. That is somebody made a claim against him and he admitted it. Avalim Hodami Piatzmo, if he just, out of the blue made some sort of an admission about his own guilt, Yochalu Lachserbo, then, if the only evidence is himself and it's not responding to a claim, then he can recant that admission. Because since he's the one who is the source of the admission.
Pesha is usually used as a semi-quasi-migui. Not used the other way, using it.
In a way it is, because, right, yeah. Usually it's to clarify. The Reisha seems incriminating, the Seifa, is liberating. Here it's more, you're right, it's a different use of Pesha or Pesha Hita than we're accustomed to, because here it's more he guilted himself, and therefore he can liberate himself by retraction. Usually you don't call that peshas
This
or
is
peshin.
not a situation of pagi de buru.
Yeah, you're right. It's a sensitive comment. But it's interesting. I'll just make this comment. The peshas peshin is a phrase that appears in a couple of mishnayos and ksuvas, and then in the Gemara because of that. This is actually a very famous.
A woman who comes says she's
But it's a
divorced.
tosefta.
A woman who comes says she's divorced, for example,
Or
admits.
peshas or peshin, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So um, here it's actually a little bit different. It's a tosefta, but it's a famous tosefta, but it's a tosefta here in Bab Metzia. But you're right, it's a very sensitive comment. The words make sense, but it's not the way we typically use them. And it's probably significant. So we'll get back to that. So then the Gemara says, Hodos Bodin Kemedim Dami. That's an interesting tosefta. Hodos Bodin is if, he incurs an obligation by his admission, as if there were 100 witnesses supporting this obligation. V'hashalish neman mishneim. But a third party is believed completely also. What does it mean, a third party? Ze omer kach, v'ze omer kach, v'hashalish omer kach, hashalish neman. If somebody's holding on to an object and two people make claims about the object, the person holding on to it, even though he admits he's not the owner, but he's the one who's holding on to it, we believe him more than we believe the claims of each of the individuals.
If he's not a owner, what's he doing holding on to it?
No, they gave it to him.
Oh, he's shomer like us, so to
Yeah.
speak.
A shalish it means a third, but it means usually like a shomer. So then the Gemara says, a Masai, and this is where we get into all the trouble. Bisman shashalishus yotze mitakas yadai. When do we believe the shalish, let's say they call it the shomer, about the details of this object,
So long as he's
as
holding on
opposed
to
to the protagonists when it's in his hands? Aval ina shlishus yotze mitachas yado. But once let's say he was the shalish, but he's no longer the shalish, says the Gemara, and the language again is very important. Hareu kekol adam neman. I'll add the words. He's no better because of his past history than anybody else.
It's
Right
like the
now,
midwife. It's like the midwife case.
exactly. So then the Tosefta goes on to speak about the midwife and the dayan. So let's continue for a minute. Neman balamekach lomar lezeh macharti v'lezeh lo macharti. Right? The owner is the one who's believed to identify the purchaser. But then again, here comes the qualification. Emasai, when is that true? Bisman shemekach yotze mitachas yada. Only as long as the object is still in his domain, right? He says that somebody bought it from him. He can identify the purchaser. Again, the language. Harehu kekol adam. He's no better than anybody else just because he had a yichus in the history of this purchase. That's all over once he's no longer holding.
Lumdus here is mnemonis or what? What's the lumdus to this?
So that's what I'm getting to. Just 1 second. So now the question is, what are you going to see? What bothers the Rif? What bothers Rashi? What bothers everybody is if this special nemonis of the mocher only applies while he's holding on to the object, how does that fit into the case of our Gemara, which is Shnayim Moksa Batalis, where the other people are holding on to it? You're no longer holding on to the object. Next is Amar chad midai v'chad bal korcha shamina mina dehecha de'ena mechach yotzim mitachas yado shamocher eno nema lomer mehai nikita midaitoi mehai nikita bal korcha. What seems to be from the Tosefta is that as long as he's no longer controlling the object, again he's like anybody else, and we don't believe him. The kashalon, says the Rif, hagarsinan hacha. In our Gemara, the Girsa is v'lo yada mihu midaita miu b'karche. It says that he, meaning who's the he? The seller, the previous owner, in other words, he doesn't know, right, who gave him the money midaite and who gave him the money balkarche.
Well, why shouldn't he have at least eid echad?
We'll get to that. Michlal, great question. We'll get to that. Michlal de'iyada. What's the implication? He doesn't know because both gave him money. He doesn't remember who gave Midaite and who gave it Baal Korchai, right? But and meaning if he did remember, Mihu Midaite and Mihu Baal Korchai, Ne'aman, Avagav dein mekach yotze mitachas yado. Toshnayim oksem betalis ktani. So this is the problem. Again, this time I'm going to simplify it. We'll take it into two steps. The Tosefta, and this is implied by the Gemara in Kedushin as well, say that the special nemanus of a mocher to identify who purchased from him when there's some sort of controversy only applies bisman shemikcho biyado, when he's holding on to the object. We'll see why in a minute. You asked me about the lumdus. We'll see why in a minute. Okay? But if that's true, then how can the Gemara apply it to Shnai Moks and Batalis?
No
Shnai
one,
Moks and Batalis, by definition, it's Zman Shein Mikcho Biyado. So what do we care whether he remembers, he doesn't remember? The implication is that he has special nemanus if only he would know. He has no special nemanus, how he could call Adam.
I found it.
So as a result, the Rif says something, and by the way, the Rambam in Perek Chaf, I should have put it here, but all right, the Rambam in Perek Chaf, Hilchos Mechira Halacha Gimel, says the same thing. The Rambam was very influenced by the Rif. The Rambam is plenty independent when he wants to be, but he's from the tradition of the Rif. That's his default tradition.
the Rif, Rimegash, Maimon, Rambam.
Yeah, exactly. The Rif, the Rach, the Rif, Rab Haigon, the Rach, the Rif, um,
Rimegash.
Migash, his father, Rav Maimon, the Rambam. That's the tradition that he comes from. So it's not surprising that in Perek Chaf, Hilchos Mechira, Halacha Gimel, that the Rambam says exactly what the Rif says on this part of it. You'll see in a moment. What does the Rif say? The Rif's answer is, wait, I lost my place. Umistaberlon, the Hodikatani Shnai Mosa Betalis Lav Akula Milsa Ktani, El Amitzia Bilchud Ktani. Aval Mekachum Emkar B'di Isa Biyada de Mocher, who says the Rif and the Rambam. The Gemara says Shnai Mosa, the Mishnah says Shnai Mosa Betalis. It only refers to the Mitzia case, the case where they found an object. But the case where they are disputing which one of them purchased the object is actually a case where the Mochar is holding on. Because otherwise, why would the Gemara say that if he remembered, that it depends on him?
I don't think that was the kavanah of the Mishnah.
It's hard to believe, right? Well, the Rif and the Rambam think it is because it's a Sherlock. It's what I call, the Sherlock Holmes, equation. Which
Did I miss something?
meaning-
Is there a fundamental difference here? In the Shnai Mochsim, you have two involved people making a claim. The Mocher is, so to speak, not involved. What's the difference does it make to him?
So let's get back to this. If you remember, we spent quite a bit of time discussing. The Gemara says that a shalish, like a shomer, right? If he holds it on behalf of two people, that's the equivalent of Shnai Moks and Batalis.
But a Shomer is also Baldova in the matter.
Well, no, not really. No.
This guy here, the Mocher, what does he care?
No. It doesn't matter. The point is the Mocher is holding it for the owner, but he doesn't know who the owner is. Just like if you remember the case of Manashlishi, right?
I hear what you're saying. It's a different.
So what's so fascinating is the following: the Rishonim, who all understood Shnai Mosa Batalis to be, a case where each one is holding half. It's like each one's holding half legally. They all had conniptions. They all had trouble with the Gemara that said that the shalish, is holding it for both of them. Up to the extent that the Rajba said the whole thing's just a havam, it's not true lamaskana. And the Rivam and Tosas of Basra said
Mishnah doesn't read that way.
you don't really need Ochsim at all. And you're right. Oh, the Chazan's saying that. The Mishnah doesn't sound like it's only Shnaim. So what does it mean, Shnaim Ochsin, if you read the answer is legally. Shnaim Ochsin through the Mocher. Just like the Gemara thought through the Shalish. But the point is that for the people who think Shnaim Ochsim is mutually exclusive half Tvisos, it's hard. But the Rif and the Rambam don't hold that way anyway. If you remember, the Rambam held Shnaim Sheyoshvim Bitzad Arema Shalchitim. Like two people are sitting next to piles of of wheat, they're not holding anything. So the fact that the Rambam and the Rif could hold that a mocher holding it on behalf of the
The
legitimate,
Rambam holds that way. How is that different than the boat?
right? So the answer is Vadei Ramai Lein Vadei. He holds like something
Huh?
like the Riva, right? There are other differences. That's what the Riva says too. You're right. That's exactly the point. So my point is that the Rif and the Rambam solve the problem by saying something which is bedochak in the Mishnah. That's what the Chazan was saying as well. Meaning it doesn't sound like Shnai Moksa B'Talis means it's in the hands of the Mocher, right? The legal answer is if the Mocher is holding it for one and not for the other, but we don't know who, then it's still Shnai Moksin through the Mocher, legally. But the only way, but that poses its own problems. It's hard to say each one's holding half if it's in the hands of the Mocher for only one.
Where's the mocha by Metzia?
No. What the Rif is saying is, in the case of Metzia, there's actually Shnai Moksin physically because they pick up the object.
But that's the case of the Mishnah. At least one half of the case of the Mishnah.
Right, but it doesn't. When the Mishnah says Shnai Moksin B'Talis, Zeomer. According to the Gemara, the Zelmar Kulishali is the Mocher case. So it's still going on Shnai Moksa B'Talis. Which we have to say is, in the case of Mitzia, it's a physical Shnai
So
Moksa.
in other words, we're talking
And in the
about
case of the
second half
Mechira, it's a
Mishnah.
legal Shnai Moksa.
Second half of the Mishnah is a case where they went into a store to buy a talus
Yeah.
and threw the money at, and they both grabbed two ends of the talus.
No, they didn't. No, they didn't grab two ends.
The
According to the Rif.
mocha is still holding it.
The Mocher's holding it, but he's holding it for one of the two of them, and he doesn't know. So legally, it's Shnai Moksin. But I'm just saying you can only say that if you have a very liberal view on Shnai Moksin anyway, which, for example, the Rashbam and Baba Basra, and I'm not going to go through all the details, and the Tosas and the Rajba do not. But the Rambam and the Rif and the ones who do, for them, it's all works out very nicely, except that it's still a hard perush on the Mishnah, but that's what you have to say. Okay, so that's the Rif Rambam solution to this problem. But let's go back and remember the problem. What's the problem? The problem is the Gemara seems to say that we believe the Mocher, if he remembers. How could that be when the Tosefta and the Gemara and Kiddushin say we only give him that status when he's holding on to the object, not if he's not holding the object. If you don't give the answer of the Rif, which is that the Mocher is holding on to the object, the question is, why the special Namanis Mocher if he's not holding it? The answer of the Rif is he is holding it. Then the question is, how's it Shnai Moksin? He's holding it for both of them. And that's the problem we just dealt with. So now what I'm going to show you is that Rashi and Tosfos and Rabbeinu Tam have different solutions. So look at Rashi. Look at Rashi here in Beis Hamid Beis.
The fundamental question still is, why is the status change if he's not holding it?
Exactly. So that's going to be part of what you're going to see in Rashi in a minute.
What makes him a less credible person from 1201 to 1202?
Or another way to ask the question is what makes him a more credible person when he's holding on to it.
Right.
Such that he's a less credible person when he's not. So what you're going to see in Rashi is in a minute.
Well, there is a klal when you hold metaltalin, it gives you credibility, right? I mean,
yeah, but that's
not a foreign concept.
Well, yeah, but that concept applies when
Only
you're
if you
making a
claim it's
claim
yours.
of ownership.
Yeah.
Here, you're not claiming to be the Chaya doesn't own the babies. The Dayan doesn't own the.
No. Hold on. But by holding something,
yes,
you have a certain credibility.
Only if you own it.
That's what we
no. In other words,
right, but not the credibility you're talking about, but a different credibility.
Yeah,
so that's what we're going to get.
Yeah. In other words, why would you be holding something if somebody didn't trust you to have integrity?
So it's either it might be. So I'll tell you. I'll throw out a few ideas for the moment. So
I mean, think of it like if someone gives you their money to manage, it shows credibility that they respect you or trust you. It's a similar concept. It gives you credibility,
right?
Credibility because you have it, that you are a trusted figure. Otherwise, why would you have it? Right.
Well, in the case of a mocha, you have it because it was yours. But
yeah, that, by the way, that's my point. My point is,
in the case of a shalish, like a shomer,
yeah,
you're quite right. There's also an element of
no, but even by a mocher, people can buy from anyone. Like, what chooses someone to buy from someone? They buy from people they trust,
So let's think for a
right?
moment, and then we'll
I mean,
identify in the Rishon. Let's think for a moment. So number one, you're
yeah.
saying there's an implicit trust when you give somebody something and you put them in a
or,
position.
or, or, or if you buy from them, meaning if you do business
Yeah,
with
I
someone,
understand. I understand.
if you do
Uh,
business, that means you trust them. You don't do business
the
with people you don't
Ran,
trust.
I'll say it a different way. The Ran in Kiddushin says it's more of a practical halakha. We rely on these kind of people because they're in a position to know better than anyone else. And therefore, he says it more as a drabanan in a practical way. But I think based on what you said, and I'm going to say it a little differently, you could say it in a more fundamental way. But the way the Ran says it is, listen, if you don't trust the midwife or the judge or the shalish, then you're going to be very restricted, in terms of
A problem. Yeah.
these are people who we need to rely upon. Well, why don't we say it this way? They're in a position of responsibility, right? Similar to what Jacob was saying. Jacob's saying more, you entrusted them, and therefore you implicitly give them added credibility. There's also a point, which is these are people who are in a position of responsibility, by virtue of their special knowledge, right? And that gives them extra credibility. I would add, these are people who, I'll say, according to the Balitosis. The Balitosis have, we'll show this in a minute. The Balitosis view is very simple. Tosis says there's no special nemonis for any of these people. It's a migu. What do I mean by migu? The person who's in control, right? If he wants, he can just make it all go away. He has the ability, to, if he's unscrupulous, he has the ability, to kind of create any kind of scenario that he wants, especially in dinim ominous. Let's say the mocher, for example. He could say, I didn't sell it to anybody. I'm keeping it. They'll say, oh, we threw money at him. They'll say, no, they threw money at me. I had no intention of selling it to anybody. So migu di boy amar, this is you'll see in Tosis in a minute, but Tosis says that's why because he's really kakol adam even when it's biyado, just that there's a migu, meaning it's a mechanism that we're accustomed to, that we're familiar with, that we know. It isn't a special din. Whereas the Ran is saying we need to rely on these people, and therefore we accord them higher level of knowledge. If you remember, some years ago we learned Gittin. We're talking about Eidachon Neman Bisurim. So when it comes to Eidachon Neman Bisurim, it's an interesting argument. Like, some of the Rishonim are very committed to finding the source for Eidachon Neman Bisurim. Right? The Bali Tosa say, it must be the Safra law, that a woman who's in a state of Nida, she's always believed about her status. The Safra law, she counts, her days. So we see from there that Eidachon is Neman Bisurim. That
Not
we
eight echot, because she's a Baldova, she's Negev B'dova. I mean, it's not even an eight
okay,
echot.
but I'm not saying what the Bali tells say. But other Rishonim, like the Rashi, says maybe you don't need a makar. So there's one Rashi, the Rashi in Vamos, it's taken a different way, where Rashi says, Eidachon is nem bisurim, otherwise you couldn't trust anybody or eat at anybody's house, ever. Because how would you know that they did a proper shechita, or that they bought from the right store, or whatever? So other Rishonim say, just because
Yeah.
you're in trouble doesn't
Everybody
mean,
maybe has to have a mashgiach in his house.
yeah, right. I mean, Rashi was saying, so it's hard to know what Rashi meant by that either. It could be Rashi was saying, Me olam lo matzina. We never found in the halacha that everybody has to, have police, you know, um, or mashgichim, wherever they go. So apparently,
Yeah, but
there's
we
trust.
only use that by the Rabbanan. That
No, 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 no. Not true.
is only by the Rabbanan.
Well, that's why it's very mechudash, because this is a doraisa. This is a nekonem bisur. Right. So some people are troubled by that Rashi. Did he mean to say, was he proving it or was he explaining it? But if he's explaining it, it's like you say, it's strange, because, or is Rashi saying, no, this is something that Jewish society, it's almost like a doraisa, einat tzibur yicholim
But
lamod.
an Eid Echad wouldn't require a shvua.
What do you mean, Einecha? Oh no,
In
no, we'll
other
get to that.
words,
We'll get to
why
that.
should he be
In
less
this
than
case,
Echad?
in this case, the Eid Echad idea we're going to get to, that's Rabbeinu Tam, but we're not up to there yet. But before I get to that, so what I'm trying to explain is that what is the nature of the special nemanos? The Rif doesn't explain it. He just says it's only b'zman shemikol biyado. The Ran, as I say in Kedushin, says it's more like you need to rely on these people, and therefore they have special nemanos, but you don't need to rely on them, but we're kind of uncomfortable with it, so we want to limit it to the time when they have the shame dayan, the shame mocher, shame dayim, shame mocher, shame chai. It's not about their history; it's about their present status. So once they delivered the baby and gave it to the parents, or once he delivered his psak, and they implemented, the din Torah, or once the mocher finished, selling, he's no longer the mocher, you know, except in a historical sense. So the special nemanus that we're talking about doesn't apply. But according to the Balitosis, it's migu. I mean, it's not special nemanus; it's something we're familiar with. So as long as there's a migu, there's only a migu when it's biyado. Otherwise, it's what we call migu lemafreya. Just because you used to be in a position where you could control the destiny of this thing, that doesn't give you present credibility. It's only when you have that power that you have that, special capacity. However, Rashi, we're going to see in a moment, has a different take completely. Rashi says the din of mikcho biyado, mikcho biyado, or chaya, is about memory. Very interesting, about memory and a sense of responsibility. Rashi says, as long as mikcho biyado, or as long as the children, haven't yet been delivered, or as long as the psak, of the Bali Dinim are omda before,
remain focused.
he's very focused. That's excellent formulation. He has to be focused as a matter of practically he is, and as a matter of responsibility he needs to be. The language that Rashi uses, you'll see in a moment, both here and in Kedushin, is Rami alei de inshi. It's like his responsibility. But the second that it's done, that whole weight, that whole burden is lifted. So at that point, it's all history. He remembers it this way, he remembers it that way. He doesn't need to be focused anymore. So that's what Rashi says, except that Rashi has one huge caveat. And Rashi says, however, we really do believe him because he's in a special position. Maybe that's why we make a difference between, maybe the din of mikcha biyado applies only when there are two people who give money. But if one person alone gives money, so then we assume that it's not so confusing, and you don't need so much focus and attention, and that'll be good enough. And that's his pshat. So let's look at Rashi. Rashi
Let's
says the
stop.
following. Let's look at the Rashi and Bamitzia first. Nishala Samocher. Rashi says it doesn't interpret follow the money trail. Right? We'll see that of you in Tosas. He said, Manokat means let's ask the mocher. Nishala Samocher, Mimi Kibel Domeha. The Tanya Bekidushin, Neman Balamekach, Lomar Lazemacharti, Lazelo Macharti. Then Rashi asks the question. But when Rashi asks a question, he rarely says Vim Tomar, Bishlomar. He just says things like the Afal Gav. The Afal Gav, even though the Messiah that the Gemara there says, and that should mean that it's not relevant here in Shnai Moksim. That's because, says Rashi, Shalonasan Leiv Ladavar Kolkach Leo Zachur Ma'akar Sheshneim Chazru Achrav Bepisuk Dameha. That's because it's not a special din of Mikcha Biyado. It's not like Tosas that Mikcha Biyado is the Migu or the shame Mocher. No, it's because of the pressure, the focus to remember. Hokim Nahasam b'denaka zuzim b'travayu, michad midaitim michad bal korche, the kivin de lo alei rami la sude, lo dok kulahai. Since, it's not his problem anymore, once it's not mikol biyado, lo dok kulahai lios nizar, mishaholcha b'lefanav he midaitim he bal korche. The whole thing, he doesn't have to concentrate and focus and make sure that he's remembering everything so punctiliously, once he's discharged his legal duty. But the bigger idea is that he was involved, and therefore he's not a third party. He's not, a regular Neman B'Yisurim. He has special information, and therefore we invest special trust.
This is not
in
Isurin
him.
anyway, it's Mimominus, no?
What?
This is not Isurin.
Right, no, right. No, I'm just kidding. I just meant that,
This is Dine Mominus, so there's a different set of rules, no?
yes, but the point is, we don't believe a normal person, um, unless he's an Eid Echad. There's no Eidim, right? And this would be a special.
And he can't be an Eid Echad because he was a Nogeh B'davar?
No, he could be an Eid Echad, but that wouldn't solve the Eid Echad in
He
Dine
said it
Mamonis is
belongs-
Mechayiv
he said
Shvua,
it belongs to Ruvain. At least Ruvain, Shimon would have to make a shvua, no?
yeah, we're going to get to that, but that wouldn't be a complete victory. It would just be a Chiv Shvua. We'll see in a moment. Rabbeinu Tam says that, but Rashi's going for a complete victory.
Now,
So Rashi's saying,
in this case, we're not believing him, even though he's insisting, I do remember who it is, or we don't
Yes.
want to even open up the case with him.
even though he's saying, I remember who it is, if it's ein mikchel biyado and there are two monies that took place, then we're not going to believe it.
And we don't ask ourselves, why would he get it? He could simply say, I don't remember. Why does he have to get involved?
He's
He's
confused.
saying, I remember.
We
Why
don't,
would
we
he
don't
not believe him?
trust.
He has a good migui. He should have said, I don't know.
No.
Leave him alone.
Rashi's not working with Migu. It's just Rashi's saying that this person has extra motivation, incentive, and reason and knowledge, and therefore we invest higher level, even though he's a single
Even if he
person,
doesn't have that, if he insists, I remember, why would we not believe him?
because we say that objectively, since he doesn't need to remember anymore, because it's no longer his responsibility. So lo doc, Rashi uses the expression.
What does he gain by saying, I remember? He's taking
It
on.
doesn't matter. We're not calling him a liar. We're just not. It's the other way. We're not according him the unusual extra, because normally you shouldn't believe him more than an Eid Echad. You should need two Eidim. It's Dinei
We're
Mamon.
not even giving him the status of Eid Echad.
Who says we're not giving him the status of Eid Echad?
Eid Echad would at least force a shvur, no?
Rashi's not relating to that. As it happens, the Meiri and the Tosri Azokin in Kedushin suggest that according to Rashi, if we don't believe him, we don't even believe him as an Eid Echad. However, that's not clear in Rashi. Rashi's just not relating to
Seems
it.
like Rashi is saying that by insisting he remembers, his nemonos disappears because people don't remember as a rule, which I can understand. If you're
Or
in
at
the
least they don't have the
it's
super.
giving out all kinds of stuff. In your mind, the second it's out of your thing, I don't want to remember.
That's what Rashi's saying. So Rashi's saying that to get the extra status of trust, right? If there are two people, if there's one person, we'll believe him. But if there are two people who put down money and it's no longer his responsibility, we won't believe it. V'lo garsinan v'lo yada, says Rashi, dafilu yada, ein amocher neman b'sheholchu. That's Rashi. Rashi in Kiddushin, which I have here in the Marmakomos, pretty much says the same thing. If you want, we can read it, but we don't need to read it. It's basically, read one. Look at the Rashi in Kiddushin for a moment, just the second one. Bisman shemikcha biyado dirami alei lemedak. Because then he focuses, because it's his responsibility. Also, he has to know who to give the money. Jacob will be, again, he has to know who to give the money back to of the other money. And he wants to make sure that he doesn't give it back to the wrong person and get a mishapara. Hilkach medak dayek. Avozman shein bikcha biyado shnei mochsen bo eno nemon the kimin delav ale rami su lo diek liskar limihu. So that's Rashi's answer to the problem. Rashi's answer to the problem is it's not really with the Rif said it was it's an absolute requirement that we only bisman shemikha biyado do we give him special nemanus, and therefore the case here is a case where the mocher is still holding on to it. Rashi's explanation is
Well,
Chaim Osim Batalis is definitely not biyada mocher.
so he's holding
However,
like
it's not really true that it's an absolute requirement that it be mikha biyado. Only if there are, if you want to give him the super extra diuk nemanus, then it has to be mocher biyad. Then it has to be mikha biyado if there are um, two monies.
the Rashi's holding like the Rif.
What?
Rashi's holding like the Rif that he's holding on to the.
No. The Rif is saying that the mocher is holding on to it. Rashi is saying the mocher is not holding on to it. But if there was only one money, he wouldn't need to be holding on to it. Whereas the Rif is saying even if it's only one money, he needs to be holding on to it. Right? Okay. What does Tosas say? Look at Tosas for a moment. Tosas says, look at our local Tosas. Lexi Zuzim Mimanakat. Pirush Rashi. Rashi says, Nishal mocher. We asked the mocher. Afagav dein mocher neman. Kishen bechabiado kedi isa basari yoksen. It's Shnayim Boksen Batalis, and we only believe him when he's holding on. That's true that we only believe him when he's holding on if he took money from both of them. If he only took money from one, that's Rashi. Vigarsina, the Girsa Basar Hachi, Vilo Yadinan, right? We don't know. He might think he knows, but right, it doesn't matter if there's two sources of money and he's not holding on, we don't believe. Says Tosos, Ubechinam Dakak Lefarish Kain. Rashi didn't need to interpret this way. The Haki Parach Shapir. This is how the proper way to read the Gemara. This is now a third pshat. Afagav dein mikcho biyado. Even though the mekach is not biyado, and therefore the special nemanus of a mocher that we speak about in Kiddushin and in Tosefta doesn't apply, because ein mikcho biyado. Nonetheless, this is your pshat. This is a Rabbeinu Tam. Nemanu ke'ed echad. We don't believe him. We're not asking that we should believe him to win the case. We're asking that we should treat him as an eid echad, and therefore my shneim nishbaim. Why does the Mishnah say both of them take a shvua? Oso shamocher misayo yiftar mishvua beidach yishaba shvua daraisa. If there's an eid echad, you don't need him to be. It doesn't have to be the mocher. The mocher is an eid echad. So even if it's a mikra biyadu, it's not worse than an eid echad. So the other guy should take a shvua daraisa, and the fellow who he's supporting, we'll see this in a moment, shouldn't have to take any shvua. That's what the Gemara was asking. The Rif and the Rashi understood that the question of the Gemara was, why don't we believe the mocher to win the case, not the shvua? So for them, they have to explain how could that be if any mikabiyado? Tosas is saying, no, the Gemara is asking about the Mishnah, which says that they both take a shvua d'Rabbanan. Why do they have to both take a shvua d'Rabbanan? Even if it's ein mikabiyado, is not worse than an eid echad. So let the guy who he's against take a shvua d'Oraisa, and the guy who he's for, as we'll see in a moment, should be pater.
Is Tosfos disagreeing with Rashi or saying we didn't understand Rashi correctly?
No, he's disagreeing with Rashi.
Okay.
V'hashta garas shapir v'lo yada, not v'lo yadinan, but v'lo yada. The yada, if he really knew, abanemon keid echad. Miu have a matzu l'shnuye delesa come under the shaila. We also could have said, oh, he's already gone. He went to Florida, not to L.A., sadly, but to Florida.
Isn't Rashi's answer to the Eid Echad that the problem is that it's not possible for him to remember because of what we just discussed?
No, Rashi didn't say it's not
The
possible.
nature of his business is such that the minute he gets rid of it, he's wiping.
No, Rashi's saying if he knew, we'd believe him. V'rim b'farish. Here's the following the money idea. A fourth pshat. Before the Gemara knew that both of them plopped down money, he said, "Why don't we just ask them which one of you paid money?"
Who is it lahem?
What?
Who is it lahem? The nisha lahem.
The two ochzim,
Ah,
Reuven and Shimon. She'enanu choshtinos l'shaker bazeh lo manasati v'hu lo nasan. We don't think that they're liars and they'll say they gave money when they didn't. They're arguing who did the mocher want to sell it to. So the fourth pshat is follow the money, literally. Whoever gave the money, the umdana, the Rashi, Tosas explains this better in Kiddushin, that the real nemana mocher is based on migu, but not migu keneged edim. So if whoever gave the money is likely the person that he sold it to.
Until now, wasn't the issue that both of them threw the money at him, and the question was that the mocher was supposed to tell you who he got the money from first. Now, as I'm hearing this, it's not just that, it's a question, who do you really want to sell it to?
Yeah.
So even if Reuven gave the money first, if that's not the guy you wanted to sell it to, then it still belonged to Shimon.
Right.
Isn't that obvious? Isn't that
That's a
obvious?
totally different
Anthony,
approach.
Andy, just
No,
think
that's
what you're
true.
saying.
That's
Meaning,
true.
if two people agree to sell to each other and some schmeckle sends the money, who cares? I mean, why does the guy sending the money be able to block your intention?
Only as an umdana, you're right. Meaning, typically, if I take money from one and I don't take from the other,
The whole thing about taking money is taking it and not giving it back. If someone wires you money against your will, and you hold on to it, I understand.
Right,
but
no,
you
right,
can't control.
right. That's why
if someone has your wiring instructions, you can't control people to wire you money.
Right, but that's exactly what the Gemara is saying. The Gemara originally thought only one person gave money, and only meaning he accepted the money from one person. So the Gemara is saying, just follow the money. So then the Gemara says, no, there were two monies. One was against his will. Once that's the case, then who gave the money?
Back. In other words, what I'm saying is accepting money for a long period of time and not giving it back. You either
this isn't long term, as you see. This is whatever. But no,
if someone wires you money in your account, you need to give it back to them.
Yeah, of course.
You can't just keep the money.
No one thinks the case.
Sorry?
Two people are sitting across
100%.
the counter from the mocher, and they both throw the money at him. So the question is either who got the money first, or
who did he intend to sell it to?
Who did he intend to sell it to? Right.
Okay. So now I want to point out. So this first of all, this Gemara is very important.
By the way, unless it's a contest, and he says if he says whoever wires the money first gets it. No, if he were to say that, then that would work that way.
Yeah, 100%.
But if you shook hands with someone and they agreed to sell, and some yo-yo sends the money first, that shouldn't block their sale.
Well, that's where that gets you already into, more ethical questions and legal questions. But yeah, it depends how the transaction goes. But that's not for now. Let's sum up for a moment before we, just explain what we're going to move on with next week. And that is as follows. So we have this interesting Gemara in Kiddushin and here, which implies that a mocher, a chaya, a dayan, they all have special nemanas. That's number one. The Tosefta seems to say bisman shemikha biyado. The question is, what is that based on? So number one, it's a very interesting halacha. Some people think, it's based on the fact that he has special knowledge, the fact that we rely on him more, the fact that he, is in a position of responsibility, that somehow that gives you extra clout when it comes to Neman. That in itself is a very interesting idea. That's the perspective of Rashi and the Rif and so on. Then the question is that only Bisman Shemikha Biyado or even after? The Rif and Rambam think only Bisman Shemikha Biyado, otherwise it's just history. The Rashi qualifies that by saying it depends. If it's still a pretty straightforward question, then it's even Bisman Shein Mikha Biyado. If it's a more complicated question, like two people send money, then it's only Bisman Shemikha Biyado, because it's connected also with his greater the reliance we have on him and the greater sense of responsibility we have. And that's only Bisman Shemikha Biyada. Then there's Tosas's view, the third view. Tosas basically says that there's no special nemanus in any of these cases. It's all based on migu. Migu is a broader concept, meaning if this person himself can control the destiny, the legal destiny, then then we give him extra credibility. Not per se because he's an expert or whatever, but because he has control. He's in a position to make things go his way, and therefore we believe him. We think if he's not ethical, then he has other ways, that he can skew this case. So according to Tosas, especially in Kedushin, but he alludes a little bit to it here as well, the real principle is not mocher chaya, somebody expertise or needs to know or knows. It's really somebody who has power and has a miku. Then there's a fourth explanation of the Mishnah, which is, no, it's an umdana issue. Namely, if only one person gives money, the likelihood is that you're selling to that person. So we're not asking to believe the mocher, we're asking to check the money trail, right? The most important pshat is the position of Tosas here, and that is, no, this isn't about winning the case. This is about shavua, and it's about eid echad. Why is that so important? We know the rule that eid echad is mechayiv b'shua. The answer is because the way Rabbeinu Tam reads the Gemara, it's not only that he's suggesting that the mocher should be believed to make the other fellow take a shvua d'oraisa, not shvua d'rabanan. It's that he believes that if an eid echad is on your side, not only does the other fellow, the opposing side, have to take a shvua d'oraisa, but if you have a shvua, then the eid echad on your side exempts you from that shvua as well. That is called eid echad misayeya, right? An eid echad on your side, an advocate, eid echad, poter min hashvua. It doesn't say that explicitly in any Gemara. It's very controversial. This is one of the main, if not the main.
Talking about a shvua d'oraisa here?
Very good. So in the case of Rabbeinu Tam, it's a shvua d'rabanan of the Mishnah. And there are Rishonim like the
Rabbanan is used to force somebody to pay, no?
What?
A shvua d'Rabbanan, basically, when you make a shvua d'oraisa, you're potter from paying.
It's nishma v'niftar.
Yeah, and you make a shvua d'Rabbanan, you have to pay. The other guy shvua, and you have to pay.
Well, there are two types of shvua d'Rabbanan too, but most shvua d'Rabbanan,
most of the time, that's
the called nishma v'not, not that you pay, but you collect.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. So what kind of shvua are we talking about here now?
So that's a great question. All we know really for Rabbeinu Tam, well, let me make it clear. If you don't hold like Rabbeinu Tam's reading of the Gemara, there's no evidence that eid echad misayeya would be poter from any shvua, right? If you read the Gemara like Rashi, or like the Rif, or like the other day in Tosas, there's no evidence in our Gemara that eid echad misayeya is poter from a shvua. If you read the Gemara like Rabbeinu Tam, that's what the Gemara is saying. And then your question is a very legitimate question. Is this, first of all, the shvua here is a shvua d'Rabbanan. That doesn't prove that it's poter b'shvua d'oraisa, right? Number two, is it a nishma v'niftar or a nishma v'notel? That's what you're asking. So the answer is it's a machlokas. The Rambam was of the opinion that the shvuas HaMishnah here is a shvuas nishma v'notel.
The Rabbanan shvua.
Yeah, no. The shvuas HaMishnah is certainly drabanan. The question is whether it's nishma v'notel, like the Rambam says, or is it more like nishma v'niftar, which is what the Rif in his Rif has hilchos Sharei Shvuos and Masechet Shavuos. He thinks, and the Ritva, and the Shittuk Betz has a dea here as well, that it's a nishma v'niftar midrabanan. Why? What's the argument? It's the old argument of Shnai Mos and Batalis. Is each person holding on to half, or is each person not holding on to anything? If each person's holding on to half and they're going to collect half, it's nishma v'niftar. If each person is holding on to nothing and they're collecting, they're taking away, it's nishma
Niftar
v'noten.
is a definition of a deraisa shvua.
Not Doraisa. I'm talking about the Mishnah here.
In other words, the ability to swear not to have to pay is a function of a deraisa shvua, right?
Yes, but first I'm talking about, we're going to get to the Doraisa Shur in a minute. I'm just saying Rabbeinu Tam says what he says in our Gemara and our Mishnah. The Shvu in our Mishnah is only Drabanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Shalo yehi kol echad v'echad token.
So the Rabbanan, how could be nishba v'nifta?
No, as I said before, there are two types of Shvu Drabanans. Like Shvuas Heses is Nishba v'niftar. Other Shvuos also may be Nishba v'niftar. Many Shvuos Drabanan are Nishba v'notel. If you look at the seventh parak of Shavuos, there's a whole list of Nishba v'notels.
Okay.
Shvuas Heses, which we'll discuss, later in a month or so, hopefully, is a Shvuas Nishba v'niftar midrabanan. What is the Mishnah's Shvuah? Nishba v'niftar, Nishba v'notel? I'm trying to point out, it depends a little bit on how you understand the bigger topics that we were discussing for many weeks, which is each person holding on to half of the talis? If that's true, then the Shvuah he's taking to keep that status quo is to support his chazakah as Nishba v'niftar. Or are neither of them holding on to the talis, legally, I mean. Physically they are. But since our two of them, they cancel each other out legally, in which case each one's taking Nishba v'notel. So that is a debate we find in the Rishonim here. But either way, the innovative thing, just to introduce starting for next week, the innovative thing about Tosas is that a new concept emerges. We're all familiar with Eid Echad being Mechayev Shvuah on Kenegdo, on the person he testifies against. And that's a din d'oraisa. Rabbeinu Tam introduced a new concept of Eid Echad Misayeya, an Eid Echad on your side, who exempts you from taking a Shvuah d'oraisa. Is that even true? So let's skip the Drabanans for the moment. You asked me, is that true for even d'oraisas according to Rabbeinu Tam? In Rabbeinu Tam, we don't know, but Rabbeinu Tam is quoted by the Maram Rottenberg as saying that this is true even about Shavuos d'oraisa. In other words, if let's say I have a moda b'miktsas. Let's say somebody says to me, "You owe me $100." I say, "I don't owe you 100. I only owe you 30." So that's called moda b'miktsas, and I have to pay you the 30 that I admit I owe you, and I have to take a shvuah d'oraisa on the other 70. Let's say I have an Eid Echad who says he only owes 30. I know for sure he doesn't owe the other 70. If he had two witnesses, he'd be patur. But he has one witness. Is that going to help him to get out of his shvuah? So this is the massive argument in the Rishonim. So the Maram Rottenberg and quotes Rabbeinu Tam, and the Rosh quotes this as well, that yes, you see from our Gemara that Echad B'Sayeh is poter, and they believe even from a Shvuah d'oraisa. Let's just look at the first words, and then we'll follow through with this next week. On the Mar Makomos, you have the Rosh on the bottom of page 2. Umidivra Rabbeinu Tam, Yesh Lilmod, from the words of Rabbeinu Tam we can learn, that if you have an Eid Echad on your side, that will exempt you from a Shvuah. So we still don't know what he's talking about. The Hevi Ram Miruttenberg, that's the Maram Rameir Miruttenberg, the famous Maram Rottenberg, Raya Ledvarav, he brought it, but from the proof you see that he holds that it's even d'oraisa. What's the proof? The Gemara says in Shavuos the following: Kol sheshnayim mechayven oso mamon, ein echad mechayvo shvuah. If two witnesses testify against you, that would obligate you in money. Then in parallel, if one witness comes, he can impose on you a shvuah. Says the Maram Rottenberg, that's based on the drasha. L'kol avon l'kol chata suda ein kam. An Eid Echad cannot be effective when it comes to avon, onshim, and chatas karbanos. Aval kam le'inyan shvuah. Says Maram Rottenberg, The shua, the limud doesn't say anything about chiyuv shvua. Maybe any shvua, any aspect of shvua, whether it's imposing on the guy you're testifying against or exempting for the person that you're supporting, will also be good. Then he says, Od kavachomerhu. I'll read the Rush. I'll start with the Rush next time. The Ramban in the Muchamos and the Ravid in his Hasagos on the Rif, and the Ravid again in Perek Chaf, Hilchos Mechira, Halacha Gimel, talking about the Rambam, are adamantly opposed. And Rabbeinu Yonah, also quoted by the Rush, Ramban, Rabbeinu Yonah, the Ravid, the all are adamantly opposed to this principle.
Is this principle basically that you can go up one notch or go down one notch with Eid Echad?
Even liftor, not just l'chad.
Either way, it takes you down a half a notch or not, whatever you want.
Legabe shvua, Eid Echad is effective in both directions.
Either it raises you a half a notch to get you out of the trouble, or it takes you down a half a notch.
Meaning, just like two edim can be mechayev and be poter.
So it's a fairly consistent, logical.
So can an Eid Echad legabe shvua be either mechayev or poter. That's what the Rambam bring in the Rosh says.
The great logic to that.
Sure. But it's not so clear, as we'll see. So the Ramban, the Rabbeinu Yonah, the Ravid, they all disagree. And this became a massive argument, excuse me, situated on this little Gemara of Alexi Zuzim. I just had to read this Gemara. You kept saying the whole time, let him be like an Eid Echad. Right? You didn't know what a Pandora's box you're opening.
Pandora's box opening up.
Because Rabbeinu the Balei Tosas did, so this became the venue for discussing this massive question.
The ones that disagree, what do they do with the logic? Or are they disagreeing?
And we'll discuss it next week.
Is there a sarcastic or what? I mean,
no, I'll tell you what it is. Basically, when you have a Gzeres HaKosav that says l'kol oven l'kol chatas eino kam of a kam l'shvu, right? So there are really two opposite ways you can understand it. One way is to say, Eid Echad isn't a parsha of Eidus.
So logic has no place, is what they're saying in this thing. I don't want to hear your logic because either we interpret the Gzeres HaKosav one way or the other way.
No, I don't. I'm not so sure about that. I mean, it can also fit it into the logic. So I think the point is that the question is, two Eidim is, as we've said many times, represents truth. We treat two Eidim not as it's likely to be true.
Golden standard.
Yeah, it's the gold standard. Now, Eid Echad is not the gold standard. So is it such a big qualitative drop-off that it's a chiddush that Eid Echad works for anything? And it really belongs more to the world of Nemanus, and things like that. It's not like a lesser Eidus, because Eidus is about being 100% true. Or no, that gold standard is a gold standard, but really Eid Echad, shares a lot. It's just, it's not as strong as Eidus. That's the question. Would we say Kol Avinu Kol Chatasu De'eno Kama V'Kama L'Shvua? Is that like, that's a chiddush that it works for Shvua? And then you'll say, Ein L'cha Bala Chidusha. We know that it works L'chayiv. That doesn't mean it means liftor. Or are we emphasizing the klal in the Gemara in Shvua? It's kol sheshnayim b'chayvin osamama ne'nachon b'chayiv Shvua. It's not just a mnemonic device to give you a hint, how Shvua works. What we're really saying is, this is, Eidus minus. But Eidus minus is very powerful. And Eidus works in both directions. Why wouldn't Eid Echad? Or is the minus already take away from the luster of Eidus so much that it's more like Nemanus plus than it is Eidus minus?
The other side of the argument, just like you need a minimum shear, and less than that, this doesn't do anything.
Right.
So that's the other side of the argument.
Yeah, there's a cut. Eidus is a cut. It's not even two Eidim. It's the unit. If you don't have the unit, that's not Eidus anymore. So it's super Nemanus. Is it super Nemanus or is it a lesser Eidus? That's really the question. But it affects so many things. So what I want to go through next week is a little bit of this discussion of of the Rosh and the Ramban and the Balamor and whatever, and then we'll see where it takes us. Okay, so to be continued.
Oh, thank you.
Good night.
Hey, good night.
Oh.
Have a great week, everybody.